Hello, peoples. It's time. We're back on our bi-weekly journey into the wonderfulness that is the world of darkness. We have a new guest tonight with us, Jennifer from Germany, I believe. Yes.
Yes, that's right. Good morning or good evening.
Yeah, depends on where you're at.
Yeah.
And of course, one of our lovely returning folks, Brother Victor.
Hello. Hello.
And my wonderful, wonderful co-host who's really stepping up the last couple of times. I've really appreciated it. It's making my life a little easier. So, Jacob?
And who continuously feels like he's not really doing anything to be awarded with, but thanks anyway.
Dude, you have no idea how helpful you've been in scheduling guests for us just for the last couple of shows. It really has been, especially since, I've not had a good week. Anyway, so as is normal, we're going to throw this over to Jacob, and he can kick us off with, I have a feeling he's going to hit Jennifer up first.
Well, usually that is what we do, is we, when we have a guest that we haven't had before, we get them to talk a little bit about themselves. So, Jennifer, I'm going to put you on the spot. I guess, kind of tell us what your experience and interest level and whatnot is on the subject. I know we've shared some of your blogs that you've written on the game before, but
very enjoyed.
For those that are not following us on every ounce of social media, they may not be familiar. So please fill us in.
Okay. So about myself, I'm a World of Darkness fan ever since the early 2000s. I've got into it with Vampire. It's still my main avenue, the one which I take most interest in. Second would be Wraith, then Werewolf and the rest. I try to keep very close up to date with everything that's going on. I built something like a small news site on Facebook to keep everyone basically up to date what's going on. I've got a blog of my own where I write about stuff like the V5 playtest, any news that I come across, anything that I find interesting, and I've got something to say. And I do sometimes visit America for conventions, or I do like to travel. Like, I will be at Tampa. I have been in New Orleans last year, and next to that, I'm also interested in role-playing games in general. Like, I follow a lot of the current crowdfundings that are going on, like games like Blades in the Dark, and I think that's so far what I would say.
Okay, thank you. Victor, you want to catch us up on what you've been doing?
Yeah, I've it's been a while since I've been on the show. There've been a few times where we've tried to make that work, and either schedules haven't lined up, or there was one day I got really terribly sick the day of the show, which was unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I've been doing some con game running work. I think I came on to Tempest Tenebrarum last year to talk about the first con games I ever ran at ValorCon last year. I ran 5 sessions at GenCon this year. 2 of them were the V5 alpha test, and then I ran a session of Mage, a session of Wraith, and a session of Changeling that were my own scenarios. The alpha test, White Wolf developed that. It was designed to test very specific rules and only used a certain subset of the rules that they were sort of ready to test and see how they interacted. That went really well. I liked the alpha a lot more than the pre-alpha, sort of in every way. I mean, it was for such a short period of time since the pre-alpha came out, it was like 1,000% improvement across the board. The other thing that I've been working on is my friend Simon and Simon, I think, has been on the show once or twice to talk about Changeling. We started a Changeling podcast called Walking Away from Arcadia that is just all Changeling all the time, deep in the canon, deep in the rules.
Fairies everywhere.
Yeah, fairies everywhere. So that's kept me very busy. That's kind of been the thrust of where my head has been in terms of gaming. It's been almost all walking away from Arcadia and GenCon prep. I loved GenCon. It was great. I had a ton of fun. I was exhausted at the end, and I'm super ready to focus on other things for a while.
I know that I can speak for at least two of the people on the show tonight, maybe three, that we are so jealous. We are so jealous.
It's only my second GenCon, so.
But yeah, I'm enjoying that. That you're getting some inside info for the show, for your show and ours, and we very much appreciate you having you on. And if you're sick, dude. Well, it's not really any way around that.
Yeah, I know. I just felt really bad about that night. I was like, really, the plague has to land on me now. So,
of course it did. I mean, timing is everything.
Yeah.
So, Jacob, have you got any new games you're going to be doing? Other than the one I'm still trying to get off the ground?
Game specifically. I've my LARP, where we're doing the Independent Alliance of the Giovanni and Setites is progressing. Actually, this Saturday is our next game. It'd be game 5. So it's storytelling for LARP is proving to be a very different experience than storytelling tabletop. I am enjoying the challenge. So I mean that's kind of cool, and I've been already kind of tweaking around with a few things, both for my game and also a few things that I'm sending to the STs of the other LARP game that I play in, on ideas and shit that buzzes around in my head. So when the Storyteller's Vault went live, I was already kind of in that mindset, and I'm trying to get something worked through to start off and hopefully have some success in getting a few of my ideas out there for other people.
Awesome. How about you, Jennifer and Victor, about the Storyteller Vault?
I'll go ahead.
I think it's interesting, though. I haven't any material pre-written or ready to go, so everything that comes into my mind would have to first put into form, actually be written, and then to be uploaded, and it will take a while before I get something on the... I've got some ideas. I'm not sure if they're great ideas, but I will see.
I actually was blown away at the fact that the day it went live, like within a couple hours, somebody already had a completed book on there.
Yeah, there were
I'm like, wow. There's some really eager beavers.
Yeah, there were I think 12 things up by the end of the first day. I mean, they released all the templates necessary to make them the week before.
Yeah, but
that's
still
not a lot of time.
Yeah, that's still a lot of work.
It is. I mean, if they had most of the writing already done, and then I guess if we're talking a little adventure or even something plan book sized, if you're devoted, you could probably put that together in a week if the template's done for you. I mean, that's a lot. Yeah, I mean, I was telling you guys before we actually started recording. Right now, I'm mostly living in kind of the latter half of the World of Darkness, Mage, Wraith, and Changeling. That's kind of my main playground. Vampire was my first love, but I'm more on the latter half now, and none of that stuff's available yet. So I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it will be. They said their next round of templates are going to land in October. I suspect those will be time period pieces, though. I get the feeling from the stuff I've seen that'll be like a Victorian vampire and Dark Ages vampire. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, and I was asking them too, because one thing I liked yeah, and I've only LARPed for the last year, but one thing I liked about like the revised clan books is they had information for both tabletop and LARP. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so I asked them, I'm like, so is that something possible? And they responded with, well, there will be templates for stuff to be BNS inclusive later. But I still like that idea, like having it. So, because, I mean, everybody uses the books. You reference the books. So why not have rule systems for, both live and tabletop?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the only thing about Storyteller's Vault that I'm not totally decided on yet. I was looking through their FAQ, and you get a fat hunk of money for it. You get like 50% of the cost, which means White Wolf is probably only getting like 30%, because that other half is split up between taxes and
drive-through RPG and
drive-through and everything else. So, I mean, really, it's really generous. The only part that I'm still kind of sort of processing is in their FAQ, they specifically said, you can use other people's content. Once something goes up in the Storyteller Vault, the license is structured explicitly so anybody can use it, and they're not enforcing any kind of attribution. They, in fact, flat out said we couldn't do it. It's impossible once we have, however many volumes, and we're not really going to try. I don't love that.
I'm not feeling them either now that you mention it.
They are not wrong about the fact that, in a year when there are hundreds of things on the Storyteller's Vault, totally enforcing 100% attribution would probably be impossible. But if they have an attribution policy and not giving attribution to the other Storyteller Vault sources that you're pulling from could result in your content taking down, then by and large the community would do attribution. And for me, that's a really important thing to encourage at the very least. So I'm still processing that. Aside from that,
do you think the community will police itself for this?
I think now that White Wolf has said, hey, it's no big deal, less so than they would have, the community might partially police itself. It might, people who do proper attribution, that might be something that helps get better sales and reputation, but I don't know for sure. Yeah, I mean, maybe. But on the other hand, they're paying really well. Like, they're paying a lot more than they probably need to. And that's a plus. So, yeah, my opinion's kind of going in multiple directions on that one.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing my concern with, and because I haven't looked at any of the similar things that Wizards of the Coast has done, because they have something that's similar for fans to publish stuff. But I'm concerned with the sheer volume of things of less than spectacular quality and having it difficult to actually find a true gem. And that's just for me specifically, because I find it, if you get like 20 people posting a very similar product, how do you know which one is necessarily good and which one is going to be crap? And
but they have a review system,
to what extent?
Don't they?
They have a review system, but how hard is it to get 5 of your friends to give you a 5-star review? And how often people just give a random review?
Yeah, I think if you look at projects like Greenlight on Steam, you can kind of start to see how that model will emerge. But I think there's a big difference between Steam, where it's video games, and there are, tens, hundreds of thousands, however many users, and so you get some of that emerging from that huge user base. And role-playing games are really niche, and then it's one IP within role-playing games. And so I don't know. I don't know if there are enough people that are going to use it to get that burden of reviews, to get people talking about stuff. I mean, I doubt. I don't think I could ever see myself going onto the Storyteller's Vault and just searching the Storyteller's Vault for content, because I would have no idea what I'm looking at. I could absolutely see myself going to game review blogs, listening to podcasts, and picking up products that are well thought of and I hear recurring things about, or that, honestly, storytellers drive this entire industry.
Yes.
Most role players don't choose their games. The vast majority of role players have no say in what they're playing. They play what, that one person in their group who is masochistic enough to storytell or DM or whatever, the term is for their corner of the world, is running. So I could almost see like an organic thing coming up where, if you write products that really speak to storytellers and have good player, content in them, they'll end up getting bought because storytellers are going to use them in games and tell their players, hey, go buy this thing. It'll have good options for my chronicle.
Yeah, so it's basically word per mouth. So words on the street that something is good, and then you pick it up. Or maybe if someone uploads something that they offer a free preview, or make it pay what you want, so that if they don't have the publicity, that they maybe get people this way to take a look at their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, around here we use the term "word around the campfire" is.
I also think we'll probably eventually see something a little bit like Pathfinder emerge. Now, obviously not on the same scale, because it's not open gaming license and it all has to go through this one venue. But I could see like a particular person or a particular group, maybe they'd form a company, maybe not. I need to look at the terms on the Storyteller's Vault more closely, but they basically create like, this is our alternate canon. And we're telling these stories and they're coherent with each other. And over time, if they get popular, I could see people going back and collecting all the titles from this one little string of alternate canon and all the stuff they've done with it. I think those sorts of things are going to end up bringing the capital to really sell titles on the Storyteller Vault, as opposed to, oh, look, I'm staring at a list of 500 Bloodline books. I wonder which ones are cool.
Yeah.
Do you think, though...
I don't know.
Well, I'm just looking right now, like the newest ones on the Vault. There's like a book for $10 that's 100 new combination disciplines. And then on the other end of the scale, there is pay what you want portraits packs, which I personally like the pay what you want and pay what you want character sheets. I like the pay what you want concept, especially when you're trying to get people's attention, because people are more likely, even if they like pay nothing for it initially, they might be more likely to pay for your second book in the series or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say just a minute ago is that, Victor, since you're really focused on Changeling, there's not a lot of Changeling stuff out there outside of, the basic books. So you might actually drum up more players if people start posting some of these really cool, and that goes for Wraith too, because I hear all kinds of love about Wraith, but nobody plays.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I think, well, and like there are specific corners of Changeling that are just sort of universally ignored. I mean, so as an example, By Night Studios, they're going to come out with a new Changeling game. And in celebration, they put up a thread on their page on Facebook saying, list your favorite kith, celebrate our new rule set. There was another Changeling group where someone basically did the same thing, celebrating By Night Studios, but it was a different group and a different thread. It was a little weird. Everyone put Kithane. Nobody put Nunahi. No one put Menahune. There was not a single native family listed. They were all Kithane. Huh. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, but I've gone back and I've been looking at those books recently, and they haven't done stories with them. Like, they're not the center of their own story. Even, like, the Samdi and the Kiasid are kind of the center of certain like stories and weird conspiracies in the vampire world, the Nunnehi and the Menehune really aren't. And, you know, I think that's why no one thinks of them. Like, they haven't read that thing that gives them that hook that goes, oh god, I want to play a rock giant. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential when the Storyteller Vault opens up to Changeling for hopefully someone, preferably from the cultures that those families represent, to develop some solid content in a way that White Wolf just never had the bandwidth to.
See, and that's where I feel awkward too, because a lot of the things that I have an interest in is stuff that I'm not a representative of those communities, or I don't live there. And so I'm like, well, I don't really have a culture that I can draw upon, and so I'll just sit here and focus. So I'm focusing on what I can relate to. So I'm writing a supplement for the Sabbat because I can understand and I like playing them, and I'm like, all right, that's great. But I'm actually excited to see if we have any players from Japan releasing a updated version of Tokyo by Night, or somebody from South Africa doing an upgrade on the Libon. Like, I'm hoping to see stuff like that. I'd love to see, you know, like our friends in Nisao Garu, to see what they might bring forth when the doors are opened up for werewolf and we have South American werewolf information from people living in South America, you know. So that's what I'm excited about with this Storyteller's Vault concept, is that we'll actually see more diversity in the creative authors behind a lot of the things that we deal with. So it'd be, like you said, it'd be great to see individuals who can relate to the tales, or they can incorporate actual tales into the Nunnehi and make them the center of their story to grab people's attentions.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really hoping for that. I think the World of Darkness would benefit a lot from that sort of spread of influence.
I'm like really curious what the Korean tabletop group is doing with Seoul by Night, which they crowdfunded the production of.
Oh, are they've already successfully crowdfunded it?
They made a crowdfunding for the V20, the Korean translation, and during this project, from what I could gather by Google Translate, they managed to unlock the creation of Seoul by Night, which they will write and design, and they're currently in the process of.
Okay,
there might be a problem for them pulling that off if there's a nuclear war on the peninsula, but that's just, you know.
We're probably not looking down at that. China more or less looked at North Korea and said, you don't want to do that.
Shit off, yeah.
When China says you're on your own, you pay attention.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, but he's crazy. And crazy people do random weird shit all the time. And anybody, you know, a crazy person with a nuke is just scarier. That's all. But
let's talk about the way more pleasant darkness in the world of darkness.
Exactly. So, but New Wave noticed also. Yeah, I was sitting here looking at the Storyteller Vault, and it looks predominantly vampire.
Well, it is all. That's all they've released right now. Oh,
they're not allowing anybody to. No, there's some stuff here for werewolf, mage, changeling.
No, that's their regular stuff. They have the White Wolf World of Darkness books do show up on the same page, but if you look under specifically the Storyteller's Vault, all they have right now is vampire information.
Yeah, all they have is Vampire First Ed, Second Ed, Revised, and 20th Anniversary. They released a style guide for those specific editions. So you can release something on First Ed rules if you want to, and use the First Ed layout template. And then they said down the road they're going to be releasing style guides and templates for Dark Ages, Victorian, By Night Studios, and eventually the other games. But they want to develop really comprehensive style guides for everything first. And I think They just wanted to open the doors a little bit and get a sense of
is this going to work or not? Like. Yeah.
I don't think it's so much is it going to work. I think they knew it was going to work. It's how is it going to work? How do we need to manage it? How much work is this going to add for us? I mean, I don't think they wanted to throw the doors wide open without some idea of, how it was going to impact them first.
Oh, I just found I have Mummy First Edition as a PDF. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they've got everything.
That's awesome.
I'm looking forward to when they broaden it out too to the other game lines, because I think once everything is out in the open, maybe we might actually see some decent supplements for like Wraith and Mummy and Demon and the other minor ones that we could go with. And Victor had mentioned earlier, the other thing that caught my attention was the idea of doing alternate timelines. I've always kind of liked playing around with that idea with some of the games I've run. But after the Dark Ages 20, when they had a whole appendix talking about alternate timelines, because if you're going to go from the Dark Ages to modern, your players are going to screw with the timeline anyway, so might as well think of other ways it could get screwed over. And I like that whole concept. So the whole idea that, somebody could go through and they could, release a book that's an alternate timeline Camarilla.
That could be interesting.
Maybe the Tremere was an independent clan and the Giovanni was part of the Camarilla, or all sorts of permutations. And that would be interesting too, because then, like Victor said, it's the storyteller's choice usually on what game you're playing. Your players might not necessarily know all the secrets that they think they know because they've been playing this game for 30 years. Yep. And storytellers like, well, this is all the resources I'm using and I'm not going to tell you guys.
Yeah, I mean,
keeps the game fresher.
It does keep the game fresher. And I think especially when you get into some of the weirder games, like alternate timelines with Mage could get real weird.
Oh, that would be odd.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there.
So, Jennifer, you said your first love was vampire.
Yeah, indeed.
So, what clan do you play normally?
Normally Giovanni, if it's possible.
Nice.
Yes.
I really like Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I really like the idea of the clan structured after a family. It's really fascinating, the whole organization, and I really like the idea of necromancers, and vampire necromancers are perfect.
Necromancy forever.
Yeah.
They used to be one of my most hated clans, but after storytelling for them, I've grown to appreciate them now. They're not.
So, yeah. So this is actually something. Probably a good time to jump into V5.
Yeah,
because had an interesting exchange. I was talking with the developers before we started running sessions. I was one of, I want to say 7 or 8 people that ran sessions. They ran something like 40 sessions. It was insane.
God, that's a lot of players.
Yeah, they changed humanity dramatically. Humanity looks nothing like it has ever looked before. And the way humanity works now is you no longer roll humanity. Like, if you do something that is worthy of losing humanity, you just lose a humanity.
I love that.
Stop. But it takes a lot more to lose a humanity. The basic guideline they're using, and I was so happy to hear this because this has always made me... The humanity system has always frustrated me in this respect.
Just a little. Is if you're doing something that humans do all the damn time, it's not going to threaten your humanity. No. And humans kill a whole bunch of people. Oh, just saying. So killing to feed no longer loses you a humanity. Killing in self-defense. I mean, that whole, kill a person, make a humanity check, that is gone. That is just straight up gone. It made me so happy. How bad? Now, there are 2 ways to lose humanity. One is if you do something truly monstrous. If you do the sort of thing that
would sort of damage a human soul. So, mass
like
atrocity.
pulling a Stalin.
Yeah, well, okay, pulling a Stalin. If you slowly become a mass murderer, truly like inflicting suffering for the sake of suffering, if you give in to like really deep, degenerate tendencies, you will lose humanity for that. The storyteller can just look at you and say, no, that damages your soul, lose a humanity. That doesn't happen as often unless you're playing with sick fucks. Having sick fucks at my table
or
at GenCon,
game.
And I can say this about them because that table was all my friends, and my friends are monsters. The other way you can lose humanity is you have touchstones. And touchstones are your connections to the human world. So your sister from before you were embraced, your a child, maybe you were embraced 80 years ago, and now they're grown and they have a life and they have a family, and like you are still involved in and care about that family. And it's a thing it isn't just, oh, look, I care because they're my family. You actively cling to those things, because if you don't cling to them, if you don't keep your hands in humanity, you will become a beast. You will give in to the beast, you will stop caring, you will become a monster and just decimate everything. And I like that a lot because of what it does to elders. Because like, oh, I'm 700 years old. And that's my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter, and I still care about her because I fucking have to. And I put a lot of effort into continuing to care about her. But I'm like 700 years old, so I'm an alien monster now, so my care isn't always great. But like, I care about her.
So it would be basically a bit like what happened in Interview with the Vampire, the reason why Lestat embraced Louis.
Yeah, it's a lot like that, except similar to Interview with the Vampire, where it's like, I care about you, I need to care about you, I'm going to embrace you. Damn it, now you're just destroying my humanity because you're a monster too. Like, that's such a classic mistake that I could see vampires making with their touchstones. And whenever something terrible happens to your touchstone, it doesn't have to be destroyed. Their life can be, fucked up. It could be a major divorce, something that makes you feel threatened, that makes you maybe want to not be as connected to them because now you're being connected to this pain and suffering. Then you lose humanity when that happens. And you can go back, and there are ways to regain it. Like it is a tough.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to ask, is that you can, if you do good, you can actually gain.
Yeah, you can, but you have to put a lot of effort into it. Like losing a humanity point is a big deal now. But it's also a point of major narrative significance. It's not, oops, I killed that guy and failed a roll. Oh well, I'll spend some experience in a week or two and it'll be fine. I mean, those days are over. I do not miss them already.
Well, gaining humanity should always be harder than losing it.
Yeah, I mean, it really should be. The reason I mentioned it when we were talking about the Giovanni is I looked at this system and I went, are you kidding me? The Giovanni are fucked.
Yeah.
All of Wraith society is built on killing fetters. Like, when you piss off the hierarchy, they find where your fetters are, they dig them out of reality, and they destroy them. And the Giovanni piss off Wraiths all the time.
Yeah, well, that's their job, I think. It's
I just looked at that and I went,
charter.
Man, Giovanni, like this new vampire structure has introduced, like, the core of the humanity system is just like, don't piss off a wraith, buddy. Just don't do it.
Well, the wrong wraith, you could find that wraith would find your enemies too, and start, giving them the heads up on what you are doing, etc. So yeah, you could they can make your life difficult or unlife, as the case may be.
Yeah.
I've always thought, that was you didn't piss off wraiths. That was just not a good idea. But
on one hand, that, on the other hand, I think the Giovanni would be exceptionally well built to basically do all the connections with the family connections they do keep and the ancestor worship and stuff. So they might have some very powerful enemies. They have some very good structure to battle it, maybe.
Yeah, I think if you could survive to be a high rank, even a medium ranked Giovanni, I think you'd actually be really well equipped to protect your touchstones. But they do still have the innates that have like friends outside the family and haven't turned all their attention inward, and those poor schmucks would be really vulnerable.
We've got one of our Brazilian werewolves in the channel, man. And it's not. It's just one of the members of the New South. Okay, it's not. I don't know that it's not Matt or Igor as far as I can see. It's Pedro.
That's fine.
So, but that's cool, man. I appreciate you coming, hanging out with us. Yeah, we mentioned you guys earlier, and wow, look, y'all just pop on like you listening.
I summoned them. So since
Isn't that
we've
a
already
2-point ritual.
We already broken the seal on V5, so let's get into that and discuss that before we go elsewhere then. Because Victor, you ran V5 playtests at GenCon, and Jen, you've blogged about the playtests that you did over in your neck of the woods. So Victor, you've had the alpha rules. Jen, you just had the pre-alpha, like the rest of us have access to, correct?
Yeah. I got the alpha rules 3 weeks ago, I think, so I could start learning them for Gen Con. I think then they
did some shady guy bring it to your door and knock?
No, the guy who runs the Recce Crew email.
Couldn't get a sketchy guy to come bring it to you, huh? That's the kind of thing you would expect from that. New rules, man.
Yeah, in a secret bound an envelope. I've got something.
Oh no! Did we lose?
Delivered by Wraith.
Oh, damn it! Yeah, we lost him.
Oh, Victor! Darn.
I might try to fill in until he returns.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Basically, the pre-alpha, I played it in Berlin on the convention. There were some elements where I was like, that's a bit strange, I would say. But I think it was a nice playtest. I've played it again at a smaller convention in Germany where they had it custom tailored to be run in, I think, 1 hour. And then I've did 4 sessions, 2 online, 2 at a convention where I did run the playtest myself. And I did some adjustments to make the scenario a bit more, I say, digestible, and to fix some of the localized stuff that wasn't so ideal, I would say. It was a really interesting experience, and it was a lot of fun too.
Okay, we're going to try.
So what kind of adjustments did you make, Jen?
There are some minor ones, like, for example, they had the GSG9 working together with the KSA. The challenge at the KSA is military intelligence operation, and they wouldn't usually work together with the police. So it was more natural to say it's the BND working together with the GSG9. And then you've got the scene at the very start where the Anarchs are fleeing from the Golden Gate, and there's a troop of 3 GSG9 officers with like these HK-416 automatic pistols, and they're basically just gunning them down. And that's something that really doesn't work in Germany. Like, I know in America there's big cases of police brutality and stuff, but we don't have something like that in Germany, and I changed it up so that they had at least some kind of a reason to basically gun those vampires down, because I saw the reason why it's in the playtest. It communicates that the Second Inquisition really doesn't have any moral objections to shooting vampires, and it communicates that they have incendiary munition. But I changed it up so that basically one vampire, after escaping from the Golden Gate, gets into a wood shack and tries to attack the folk, the audience which is just watching, and the other to frenzy, so that they have something like a reason. And at the very end there's something like, the whole of Berlin is in a shutdown. You can't escape by car. I had to work a bit around, basically being upfront and saying, okay, all the streets are blocked. You don't really think too much about it. They are just blocked because usually there are a lot of smaller streets, a lot of possibilities to just drive out and avoid the highway and the bigger roads. And that's something that was a bit challenging to communicate, yeah. But basically those are the three changes, like case A got to be BNB. The troopers from the GSG9 got an actual reason for shooting down apparent unarmed civilians in front of an audience, which is still a lot of a stretch. And then the thing with the city lockdown I tried to explain it a bit better. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense because you can get away with a little bit of cinematic artistry, but in countries like ours, I agree that we probably wouldn't have as much crazy bullets flying as some of the other countries. So
I tried to look these stats up for police shootings in Germany, and it's like 11 in a year. Yeah. And usually it's police people people approaching them with a knife or a gun while suffering from mental issues, and the police person sometimes misjudging the events, and that's all we got. Like even with the big escalation in Hamburg with the international summit, the only in apostrophes, like it's still bad, but they just basically roughed people up. So it's to no extent where you would say, yeah, that's a scene that's believable. Yeah. I tried to run it by the book in my first game, and it almost had a player walking out on me.
Really?
Yeah, I totally believe that. I tried to run the pre-alpha by the book to learn the rules because I knew I was going to be running a version of the rules at GenCon, and one of my players has dual citizenship in Germany and America, and he spent a lot of his life in Berlin, and he did not have kind things to say about the way a lot of that was described.
The other challenges like the stuff with Pegida they put in, where they wrote Pegida in the incorrect way, which was a thing that I tripped a bit about over in the Berlin playtest. I was like, Pergida? No, if you want to use it, it's Pegida. And it's a bit different, like you don't usually have people running around in a jacket and says Pegida. And minor stuff like this.
Victor?
Yeah.
New Wave said, in light of what I was talking to you about prior to you crashing.
Yeah, sorry about that.
She says, she says, a man in a trench coat and sunglasses shows up at your door and hands you a large envelope and said, the first one's free.
Oh, no, I don't want the first one to be free. I want the last one to be free because, yeah.
Oh, no. They can't, they don't make any money that way.
Yeah, well, I'll just say so we had to print out our own packets.
Mm-hmm.
And I was being proactive, and I printed everything out like 3 days in advance. 2 days in advance, they sent an updated packet with everything, like full Illustrator layout. And I was like, really? I just blew like half my total cards, man.
The guy at Kinko's is going to lose his mind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So. But oh well.
Yeah. So, you were in the middle of something when you crashed.
Yeah, well, so actually I was gonna say maybe we should talk about the pre-alpha first, but we've just sort of talked about the pre-alpha for anyone that hasn't tried to run it yet or hasn't read it yet. So I think that's kind of perfect. The alpha is way better. It's a completely different scenario, and the alpha was written by Matthew Dawkins. For anyone that doesn't know his work, he does a lot with Onyx Path now. He was the lead developer for Dark Ages 20th, and I think all of the Dark Ages 20th source books. He's written pretty prolifically for Chronicles of Darkness as well. He wrote the Chaos Seed and what are the modern Cappadocian?
Harbingers.
Harbingers of
The Harbingers of Skulls, yeah.
Yeah, in the Lord of the Bloodlines book, he wrote those chapters, and he's done a bunch of other stuff here and there. And so he wrote the scenario. I think he was also the lead dev on Beckett's Jihad Diary.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah. He was the lead dev on that, and that's part of why they tapped him. Like, he's done a bunch of stuff for Vampire at this point, and he wrote a really knockout scenario. And they tapped some really old canon. It's set in Gary, Indiana, and you are smack dab in the middle of the political machinations of Mobius and Juggler. And Sullivan Dane shows up. If the right players, if the right characters end up getting
dropping
picked.
names all over the damn place.
Oh yeah, I mean this scenario was about making long-term fans kind of giddy while they played it. Like, that's what they were going for. They totally accomplished it. Unlike the pre-alpha, which was kind of a hallway, which is a term that usually gets used in video game RPGs, where it's like, here's your hallway. There are no left turns. There are no right turns. You just go forward. And yeah, it feels like we
call it theme park.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the pre-alpha, when I tried to ran it, felt very much, here's the hallway, scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, you're done. And not that the alpha didn't have a little bit of that, because it had to have, a discrete scenario that people were going to run 50 times or whatever. But every scene had 8 optional side scenes that you could or couldn't use. So each time you played it, it was a little different. There was a lot more player agency. You didn't feel nearly as driven. And so the whole premise of the thing is really kind of tied in with Mobius and Juggler and some of the new plot points from the new edition, with the you are what you eat blood dynamic. Mm-hmm. I don't want to ruin too much of it in case anybody has storytellers who are going to download it when they release it and run it for you, because it is kind of a fun scenario to learn about in the moment. So yeah, for anyone who thinks they have a friend they can get to run it for them, I don't recommend downloading it when it comes out. Get your friend to run it. It's totally worth it. The combat system is a lot of fun. It's a little backwards for me. Not backwards bad, it's just backwards from the way I normally deal with combat. Instead of best initiative going first, best initiative goes last. Whoever has the worst initiative goes first, so that later people can respond to what they're doing. And whenever something happens, if you have the highest initiative, you can opt to sort of interrupt. Oh. So you have the option to kind of jump in at the moment. And it's basically just like saying, okay, everybody held their action. Well, you've got the shittiest initiative, so you don't get to hold your action. What the hell are you doing? I mean, that's basically what it boils down to.
That's kind of a cool idea of doing it, though.
It is. It takes a little more keeping track of in your head. There's a little more, okay, this is where we're starting, but anybody could jump in at any time. But it is kind of neat, and it does create very dynamic combat, especially because combat is so fast. You don't roll soak. You can roll dodge. If you're getting fired at, if it's close range, then the whole attack combat, if it's melee or brawl range, everything is two-way, and whoever gets more successes does damage. So you can attack someone in close range and take damage on your turn. And then they still get a turn. And who knows, you could do damage to them on their turn. It just depends on how the dice fall. So it's a lot faster and messier, and it feels a little more like combat. Yeah, I mean, you don't roll damage. You just do the damage you do. And you do more if you hit really well. So, yeah, I mean...
Speaking of which, did you get any of the cool dice they were handing out?
I don't remember seeing them hand out any dice.
I saw pictures of... They had a whole bunch of the dice. Different colors.
I think that may have just been dice that people had, but I could be wrong about that. I did not get any dice.
Oh, bummer. Oh, well. Yeah, they posted a picture. I guess it was some brochures and, stacks of dice on a table. They were kind of freebies. I think the one was the logo.
Yeah.
Thought it was kind of cool. I said, see, that's the kind of thing that you want to grab because nobody's ever going to have those again.
Yeah, probably not. But yeah, it was a really, really good scenario, and the game is coming together in really nice ways. I really love the new humanity dynamic, which I was telling you guys a little bit about. I think that was before we started recording, though. So
no, I think we did.
Was it not? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the humanity dynamic. I really like hunger. You don't have, Bloodpool is dead, and it was a little awkward in the pre-alpha. You sort of counted your hunger and rolled it at the end of a scene, and if you didn't have a clean scene end, it was just, when do you roll it? They got rid of all that, and now whenever you do something that rouses the blood, you drop a hunger die. You just drop one hunger die. Does my hunger go up? And so your hunger goes up a little more organically. That worked a lot better than the count up and roll however many dice at the end of the scene dynamic.
That sounds good, because when I ran the pre-alpha at a certain point, after like the first 2 games, I decided that I don't do the scene breaks anymore, because it really felt like, okay, now we do a pause, and now we roll a lot of dice and do a lot of bookkeeping, and now we continue, which was a bit strange. So I only rolled hunger when they were like either at a really calm moment or when they went at 5 blood roses.
Yeah, so now just whenever you use a discipline, increase an attribute, whatever you do, you just throw a hunger die and see whether or not it increases your hunger. And the only place it gets a little bit cumbersome is, say you have 1 strength and you're just like, screw it, I'm just going to go to 5 strength and we're going to do this thing. You roll 1 blood for each dot you increase, but you roll them 1 at a time. The reason for that is, okay, I'm at 3 hunger. I'm going to try and get to 5 strength. Well, you roll 1 hunger die. Okay, now I'm at 2. You roll 2. Oh, my hunger just went up. Do I want to keep going? Sure, why not? You roll 3. You're up to 4 strength, but now you're at 5 hunger. You could no longer rouse the blood, and you immediately frenzy check.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It smells like a frenzy roll.
Oh, yeah, no, you hit 5 hunger, you frenzy check. It's not an automatic frenzy, but there's definitely a frenzy roll. So, yeah, there's a lot more back and forth and give and take now, and a lot less let's do bookkeeping for 10 minutes. So
now, did they release it? Was yesterday the new Toreador? Now, is that going to be the new clan cover?
I saw that announced as the new Toreador cover. I don't know exactly what that art is for. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
But I don't know exactly what it's for.
I figured they were just going to, update the clan books. We're about ready for that.
That's not going to be a right away thing, though, Peter. That's going to be they're going to be releasing a core book first, and that's probably where this artwork's going to show up in, is going to be the core books, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought too. From my understanding, they just wanted to introduce the art direction Mary Ann, the new designer, is going for, and showcase some of her artworks and how she will envision the Toreador within the new core book and in the Camarilla and Anna setting books.
I'm having issues that they gave us Toreador first.
Well,
it's an iconic plan.
They're going to pick the ones that look nice. Nobody wants to see Tremere.
Nobody.
People.
Oh, look, you're in a suit.
No, I was thinking Bruja would have been better. Just saying.
Yeah, it's a suit. It doesn't look as nice as the Ventrue or the Giovanni.
Yeah. Well, so the issue of the clan books actually brings up something else that they said. And I have to admit, I actually kind of pushed this issue in the panel about what's up with Onyx Path and White Wolf in the World of Darkness. And I hope I'm going to say her name properly, Duane DeVere.
Dane
DeVere was talking about their plans for, how they're going to go about developing. And she really drove home that they are a licensing company, first and foremost. So they're going to do this 3-book set in-house. The main vampire book that is going back to the Just 7 Clans, only Camarilla. A book all about the Camarilla. At least I'm pretty sure it's only 7 clans. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they're going back to that format. And then a book on the Anarchs. And they're going to release that 3-book set either at the same time or close to each other, but roughly that's going to be what they're going to release. And they aren't viewing it the way White Wolf viewed releases in the past. They view that as their plot Bible. So that combined with Beckett's is kind of, here are the books that are our Bible for licensors. And I asked the question in that panel about Sabbat, because in previous announcements they've said we're going to start here, the Sabbat will come later. I think at the time they had some estimates on timeline, and I noticed the Sabbat had been disappearing from announcements. And so I said, is that still planned? Is that still something you will be releasing? And she said the Sabbat is absolutely happening. Yes, but it'll come later. And I kind of pushed again saying, but is it something you're going to do? And she actually confirmed that the Sabbat, and so I pretty much assumed just about anything else, very well could be done by a licensor. She actually, turned to Rich Thomas and said, maybe the Sabbat will be done by Onyx Path. It was a maybe, but those words did come out of her mouth.
Well, she's in love with the La Sombra. That's her favorite clan. Even though they used her as the Tremere, I still don't get that.
The Tremere repeatedly. I have seen her as Tremere in at least 3 different seasons. So,
but the conversations I've had with her, we almost got her for the La Sombra show. And she's like, that is my clan. She's Spanish. So, of course, know.
Well, and also the La Sombra are fantastic, and I love them forever.
They're all right. I'll deal with them over the Simiche.
And I'm glad to hear that, though, because whether it's the main house or whether it's a licensee, it doesn't matter. But because their initial concepts and discussions are basically making it sound like they were burying the Sabbat in some dank corner of the Middle East and not going to deal with them at all, kind of a thing. And I'm like,
I can't do that. No.
I did have this feeling in Berlin because we had this big Enlightenment and Blood lab, and it had a lot of Sabbat people running around happily recruiting people left and right. My character got recruited into the Sabbat a bit by accident. She didn't know what she was doing.
Yeah, they do like turning cannon fodder every chance they get.
Yeah.
So, okay, can you give us some heads up on some of these other, since we really haven't talked much about the announcements?
Yeah, so that was kind of one of the biggest announcements was just the extent of licensing, that they are going to continue to do V5 stuff with Onyx Path. They basically confirmed that, with Dane on the screen. Rich talked a fair bit about some of the V5 projects. They didn't give specifics about them, but that there were multiple V5 projects that they were in conversations with White Wolf about. They weren't going to release any specific details until after V5 dropped, obviously, because... Well, yeah,
because shit's going to change.
Yeah, well, yeah, who knows? And just emphasizing that, Onyx Path will still be doing projects. They just won't be the only ones anymore. It won't be just them.
Yeah, well, they're finding out that they can't turn out all of the stuff that we as players are screaming for by themselves. They need help.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to hand this off to other folks, which is the licensing thing you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so... and it also gets into things like the Soul by Night. There was a French translation of Vampire Dark Ages, I think. And I think there's going to be a French Dark Ages, like one of the stretch goals they got on that was an extra supplement.
They're doing Paris by Night, and they're doing a scenario or adventure for Paris by Night.
Yeah, I was asking,
right.
Was it last show, Jacob? When I was asking if they were going to be turning out any more of the by night?
Yeah.
So it sounds like they are.
Yeah. The other big announcement that came out, and I don't know how many people will be thrilled about this particular book necessarily. I'm thrilled about it, is there is going to be a Changeling 20th Player's Guide.
Yay!
And the thing, players guides are one of those things where, of course, I'm going to buy it. I want it enough to buy it. Am I necessarily super excited I'm getting a player's guide? It's a little obligatory. Of course I'm going to get it. It'll be full of useful stuff, but it's not like juicy like Beckett's or Book of Kingdoms. So, it's cool.
I mentioned that I found my Wraith player screen, right?
It
was stacked up with the Wraith player's guide.
Yeah. The reason I'm super excited about a Changeling Player's Guide, beyond the fact that I just want more Changeling, even if the Player's Guide is a little bit generic, is just the fact that, yes, they're going to sign off on more 20th books, as there's room to do them. They were talking about Mage releases, and they said, the Mage timeline, because it was finalized before the sale to Paradox happened, is very long. And potentially, they might not get through all of it before Mage 5th lands. Who knows? Anyone who's looked at Onyx Path's future projects knows there's a lot on there already.
There's a lot on their plate, yeah.
But there's a lot.
Phil's working on a lot of shit.
And Phil does 90% of the writing himself, which is magnificent because he's a great writer, but it doesn't help throughput.
No, it doesn't. It does not.
We get amazing text, but we get a little bit less of it. Okay, whatever. But they more or less confirmed, Onyx Path is going to be allowed to continue to do 20th anniversary books right up to the point that they release their next edition. And the other thing is they kind of seeded that the new games might not be coming out as quickly as they were talking about earlier this year. Like, earlier this year, there was talk about, Vampire will land in Q1 and Werewolf will be shortly after.
Yeah.
And some people saw,
there's no way in hell you people are going to be able to pull that off.
And it's what? And there was a point where Rich Thomas was talking about what they might do in the future and how much of these lines they'll finish. And he said, we're just going to keep going until, the White Wolf people tell us, hey, it's going to take us 2 years to do the next one. Keep going. And Danae was sitting at, the other end of the table, and she was just nodding. Yep, that sounds right. So, that's not to say that, they know it's going to take that long, but I don't think they're in as much of a rush as at least it felt like they were in 6 months ago.
But, I think that's good because that means that there's a focus on quality
as opposed to quantity, yeah.
They're not rushing to get this shit out right away, which is good.
And ultimately, the only person on the core White Wolf team that has a lot of publishing role-playing game experience is Shane DeFriest. Elrickson came into the industry through the White Wolf MMO, which,
when he was with CCP.
Yeah, he worked on that for a few years, and so he definitely has a history with the canon and whatnot, but he wasn't part of, the putting out role-playing books.
No,
Shane is really the one person who had that, and Shane, I don't know all of Shane's more recent experience. I know he did work with By Night Studios on Vampire quite a bit, but his history with White Wolf was when it was a full production shop, and they had full-time developers. And
when they were still in Atlanta?
I think, yeah, the later end of while they were still in Atlanta. I know he was pretty involved with New World of Darkness, a little bit with Old World as well, but kind of the later part of Old World. But, it just doesn't work like that anymore.
No.
You don't have a full-time employee for each line dev. And if they're not a full-time employee, you just can't get the same bandwidth out of them. Just as human beings, you can only do so much.
No, but the concept of, we were talking about earlier about the Storyteller Vault, is if they can farm out some of this to folks who do have some good credits, writing credits.
Yeah,
they can actually turn some stuff out in a fairly timely fashion, but you're gonna have to farm it out to do it.
Well, but the Storyteller's Vault is all non-canon, and they've been
I'm using that as a for instance, dude.
Yeah, I think they're going to farm a lot of it out. I think a lot of it's still going to go to Onyx Path because Onyx Path has the largest set of expertise related to the canon and systems right now. But they're going to start to pull in other groups as well. But I think what's significant about it is, I suspect they've neither confirmed nor denied this, but my current suspicion is they'll do this sort of core game Bible release for each of the major lines, at least the 5 big ones.
So this is how you write this.
Kind of, yeah. Here's how you write this. Here's the core system, and then license out the line.
Still haven't heard anything about Dark Kingdom of Ebony after they mentioned they were going to farm that out too. They were still looking.
I don't know. I think they'd have to find the right person to do that. I don't know how big role playing is
in Africa. I don't either.
Well, and it's also tricky because Africa's a big place.
Well, there's a lot of is a lot. There's a lot of cultures there too. So,
yeah, it's not like someone who lives in Egypt can represent Africa, or someone who lives in South Africa can represent Africa.
No, an Egyptian is not going to be able to write Zulu tribe shit.
I think it has the same issue like Kindred of the East, where they notice that it might be a bit insensitive to actual Asian people, and Kingdom of the Ebony Kingdom, something like that. It as well got the problem like Kindred of the East has some fan base. I haven't seen anyone playing the Ebony Kingdoms. There might be people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that was the whole. We've done a show on Kindred of the East, and that does tend to pop up rather regular because Jacob used to storytell Kyoto by night. Yeah. Yes. And so, yeah, there was a lot of discussion about cultural misappropriation. I guess that's the most polite way to put that.
Well, and the only thing from that line that has shown up in the 20th are the Hissien. The Changeling book from that line ended up in the 20th because they included all the Changeling groups in C20.
Which is cool.
It is cool, and they definitely cleaned their systems up and made them playable, which is a big improvement. There's really only one system hole in that whole chapter, and it's fixable. You can kind of improv around it. But nothing else. I mean, not the Hengeyokai. I mean, I guess the Nine Tails. I guess the Kitsune showed up in the Changing Breeds book.
Yeah, they would. That's one of the. It's a popular kith.
Yeah.
The Kitsune.
But there's not a lot else that's shown up from that line. So.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anything about, and I would probably assume that Jacob would catch it before I would if somebody had said something, being he loves his Kwai-Chang.
Their official stance, like Martin's been very clear that he does not want to go forwards in that direction without having individuals from those cultures actually involved. So the World of Darkness will be very Euro-centric and American-centric, at least until such a time that they are able to get individuals from these other areas and other cultures to be able to be involved. So,
like they're doing with the Dark Kingdom of Ebony.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they haven't announced anything about the Dark Kingdom of Ebony. I mean,
no. The only thing we heard was they were looking for writers from various African cultures, and I don't know. Like I said, that was the last I heard. Was that they were looking. But they haven't said anything. They haven't announced anything, as far as I know, because I'd like to see some more kindred come out of Africa.
But looking doesn't necessarily mean actively searching, or does it mean that they're only going to use people from there? Like that's I don't think they necessarily have want ads in. The Nairobi citizen looking for people, right? Like I think they are. That's just their stance is that they're only going to do things like that if they can get the people from those areas to be involved. Well,
this is a very popular game, and as you can see just from our guests tonight specifically, and a few other nights, is that White Wolf has struck a chord with a lot of different folks and from all over the planet. And we have Brazilian werewolves, for God's sakes. So we're getting that it's a much more cross culturally. How's the best way to put that? It tends to strike a chord regardless of what culture you're from. Vampires and werewolves.
Yeah, that's true, but I would imagine that they go for, maybe if they do something for Africa, it's like a really big continent. The US itself fits several times in there. That they maybe go for a different approach than trying to put out one book for the whole continent, but maybe something about kindred in the, okay, that's not Africa, but maybe kindred in the Middle East, in a certain part of the Middle East, maybe.
That's the Assamites.
Kindred in the,
well, it's more than the Assamites. There's more going on there than just that.
Yeah, it's too big place for only Assamites.
That's true. But yeah, that's what I was thinking. Even with the if they do start to look at the Asian aspects of the Kwai Jin, if they decide to some point down the road, right now doesn't appear to be that case, but further down the road they're going to write Japanese, a book on Japanese, and a book in China and India, and so yeah, you can't just write one book for Africa or Asia and say, here you go. There's just not enough there. And there's not enough room in one book for that.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is, especially just thinking through, like, Africa, I'm trying to remember which part of Africa it is. I want to say, it's in northern Africa, northern eastern Africa. There's one particular country where Catholicism sort of naturally migrated down into Africa well before it had solidified in Europe. And there's a huge Catholic tradition that includes a completely different Bible. Because
there's a lot of Gnostics down there too.
Yeah, I mean, the religion moved before Gnosticism had been wiped out. There's some of the infancy Gospels are part of the standard Bible, and given that Vampire is the one game that has a really heavily Judeo-Christian background, Kindred of the Ebony Kingdom was very wrapped up in an image of Africa as intrinsically tribal, which is...
But that's not the case for all of the cultures.
It's not the case for a lot of Africa.
Yeah.
So
Bedouins, they're African, but they're not black.
Yeah. I mean, I'd much rather see, an exploration of what does Gnostic Catholicism, like, what are Gnostic Catholic vampires like in this culture, and then a Johannesburg by Night and a book that really focuses on Egypt, instead of even trying to even think of Africa as a thing. Africa is not a thing.
Yeah,
no,
it's just not.
It's a large conglomeration of many, 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 many cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Well, same with South America. Same with Asia. Like there's all these. It's sad to say, but there's all these colonial terms that we still commonly use that we just group people together with, and it's like, well, no, it's like it's not that way. That's not the way the world is.
Mm-mm. And you're right. I mean, and you can blame the British for that. Just saying.
Well,
they rolled into these countries.
Says the country that cuts Asia in half to make a map. So
yeah, I mean, I was going to say the British and the Portuguese and the Spanish, and the list goes on.
Yeah, all the big seafaring cultures that built colonies all over the planet, and then attempted, like they did in India, of anglicizing the entire continent. You saw how well that turned out, actually, with the whole Raj deal. They're getting away from it now, finally. But how long's it taken? Almost a century after the Raj period ended with Gandhi, and yeah, we should be coming up on a century soon, shouldn't we? For that,
close to, yeah.
So yeah, and then you also have these cultures aren't static; they're constantly changing. and new things are added to the cultural zeitgeist of that particular tribe, if you want to use that term, for Middle Africa. There's a lot of tribal societies in there. The Zulu, the Bedouin, So yeah, of course they're are Jinn part of the pantheon of World of Darkness?
The Jinn. Well,
we've kind of talked about it at one point. I think
depends. It depends on how you want to include them.
Yeah, they're written up in the Book of Lost Paths as spirits that the Taftani have a tendency to enslave. I know that the Jinn have a place in God's Monsters and Other Familiar Strangers that's coming out for M20. To be honest, though, the Jinn should be changelings.
Yeah, and that's probably the case. Fae. But the whole concept, though, is that once this became, a thing, as far as, a group of people, they start talking about these spirits, demon, whatever you want to call them. In one culture, they would be helpers. And in other cultures, they're demons. So, yeah, you get a lot of cross-cultural contamination with religious aspects. Very similar to that. So, yeah, Africa, it ain't all one place. Asia ain't all one place either. The only places that I can think of that are fairly homogenous are North America, and that's about it.
But even in North America, you would probably not like to have a book like USA by Night, but there's a difference between New York by Night and, I don't know, Austin by Night or
New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those are all dramatically different places. Even within one state, things vary a lot.
And you say nothing's homogenized except for North America. Well, except for all the various indigenous cultures. We have the Spanish culture. We did the French
our
culture.
Damnedest to wipe out most of those cultures. Thank you.
We've got the Quebecois French culture up here in Canada, and we've got the
they don't count. They're French.
The Bayou French culture down there in the States. And we've got all the indigenous cultures, more so out west here, but that are still fairly, existent. North America would not necessarily, and even just America as the nationality, as a culture itself, would have so many fractures. So I think that just drives the point home that you just have to.
You can't write one book for the whole thing.
Small little subsection, right?
Well, and actually, there's an episode of the Higher Level Gaming podcast where they brought on Alina Pete, who is a member of the First Nations in. It's not Quebec. I know it's in Canada, but I forget which nation she's a member of. But she's a huge World of Darkness player, and she wrote.
What was her name?
Alina Pete, she's the artist for WereGeek.
I know that name.
Yeah, she. So she's a big World of Darkness player. She's a big geek. She's also a member of one of the First Nations.
That's what they're called,
Canada.
First Nation. Yeah.
Yeah, and they talked about native cultures and role playing games. It's an amazing episode. I really recommend looking it up. I forget the number. But if you look up Higher Level Games podcast, and they really pick apart like werewolf, like oh come on, let's talk about werewolf and native cultures and just how weird that relationship is. Yeah, and she's a big werewolf player. She says, "I love werewolf," and this ridiculous mess that is the Wendigo.
Right. I was waiting for you to mention them,
but I play them. And here's what I have to do to make it work. It's a really fascinating episode from the perspective of someone who is both critical and loves the game, which I think is probably the best perspective you can get on that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, and that gets into a space where I would love to think that White Wolf could start to maybe tap some people to write some better content for some of like the Nunnehi, the Wendigo, the Uktena, But it's such a knot to unravel, and it's weirder, and it's not necessarily as visible in a lot of senses, which is unfortunate, but it's just the truth. In terms of when I've been trying to hunt down people who have opinions on the Nunnehi for Changeling to try to get some other perspectives, it's a huge, vacuous, empty chamber out there, and it's really kind of it's been some perspective gaining for me. Just
in
how
a
much
game that is very, very niche market. That's even more niche.
It is, but when the Nunnehi were released, they had more splats than the main game.
Really?
Yeah. It's not true anymore, only because they added core splats in C20. But for most of Changeling's life, the Nunnehi nations had more family than the Kithane had kith.
Oh, wow.
And yet, they never really did anything with them. And the player base really didn't use them very much.
That's because
it was weird.
Most people play werewolf or vampire. It's like I said, there are the other splats that we love, but nobody plays them.
Well, no, but I mean the Changeling player base. I'm not talking about the World of Darkness player base. Like, there is a big Changeling player base, but they only played the Kithane.
See?
So
even there, they're being a little. What is the term? Where you like you and what you do, but all these other cultures not really hip to.
Which, I mean, is unfortunate. I love the heck out of the Nunnehi, and I can make it all up myself, but I would love to get some inspiration from some other players.
That's what
I have one player. There's one other player I know who really uses them. It's a small sample size.
Yeah. So, Jen, you said you played Wraith too?
No, I didn't play it. I have read some of it, and I find the concept fascinating, but I haven't found anyone to play it with.
Nobody plays.
I had almost one player, and then he was like, "Oh no, I played it, and it always ended up in a really uncomfortable PvP."
That's right.
It's the one splat everybody loves, but nobody plays.
I'm really curious about the Wave 20s coming out, hopefully soon.
I want Wraith 20 so bad.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
That's going to be that'll probably be my first purchase if I'm going to buy another core book. That's going to be.
It's funny that you should say that, because I remember when I first started getting into Wraith, there were interviews with White Wolf developers, and they said every single major con, they'd have someone walk up and say, "I love Wraith, but I can't find anyone to play it with me." And then 10 minutes later, someone else walks up, "I love Wraith, but I can't find anyone to play it with me." And it's because it's the con, they all ended up in the same place, but at the end of the weekend, they went back to their hometown, where they were the only person who liked Wraith. I remember when you guys were looking for someone for the first Wraith episode, and I was like, I ran a 6-month chronicle and that's it. And in my world, that's nothing. I mean, my average chronicle length is like 1 to 3 years. And I did this little throwaway thing, and I remember you being like, "But you've played it."
You played.
in Wraith, that's like an eternity.
Oh, really?
Kind of. It is super uncomfortable. Like, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. It is intentionally unnerving and unsettling and emotionally traumatic. The fact that 2nd edition Wraith had, they put out quotes from famous people for marketing, and they had a quote from Thomas Ligotti about how wonderful Wraith is. And what were his exact words? It was something like, "A playground of nihilistic delight." It was something like that. And if for anyone who hasn't read Thomas Ligotti, he's like the despotic, depressed child of H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe, where his parents just go, "You have got to lighten up, buddy."
Yeah, really.
And he is really bleak. So you get a quote from him about the game, and it's beautiful. I had fun playing it, but
why do you think I wanted you to play the Wraith for the game? Speaking of which, I still don't have your character.
I know.
But then again, you're not the only person who hasn't turned in a character yet. Eric hasn't either. Jacob was the first up, man. He got his shit.
Because I got nothing else to do in my life, and I sleep 4 hours a night, so I have lots of spare time.
He did. He actually wrote up a really nice background and everything. I was super impressed. Most folks don't put that much effort into their characters, and I love it when somebody does. They actually show that they're really hip to playing.
Yeah.
So, well, come on.
Now we hit dead air. What?
No dead air. No dead air. I'm trying to remember. I had a question before I went into Wraith mode, and now I can't remember what it was.
Maybe a question of mine. At the GenCon panel, it might be that it's a misunderstanding, but I thought one point that they got across was like they won't be putting out new V20 books, I think, for Vampire.
Correct.
Because of the new... Okay, good.
Yeah, V20... Yeah, official V20 is finished. I mean, Beckett's is still coming out, and they have to do the V20 Dark Ages Jumpstart, and those will be the last 2 books. They did announce that they are doing a werewolf anthology in the spirit of the Endless Ages anthology. So Endless Ages was like a series of vampire short stories intentionally designed to be in the style of the various editions. So there were like stories specifically modeled off the writing from first edition, second edition, revised, and then Vampire 20th. And they're going to be doing an anthology like that for Werewolf. I forget the name. It'll probably be up on the Onyx Path site at some point in the next month. But yeah, I think that text and the Changeling Player's Guide are the only new 20th texts they announced.
So, well, yeah, they're gearing up for V5, so...
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you know, Beckett's still going to take a while. They still have the Dark Ages Jumpstart. So, I mean, they're probably... I mean, that kind of lines them up for the rest of this year. And then V5, you know, if it stays on schedule, is like March or April of 2018. And then they'll start working on, you know, their V5 stuff. For all I know, they might start working on the V5 stuff before that. I doubt they'll announce any of it until
they drop
the
it.
V5, yeah, the core book is out. But I wouldn't be surprised if they, once the text is finalized, they deliver it to Onyx Path so Onyx Path can start early development on, you know, whatever projects they're going to do. But that is totally my own speculation.
Yeah, well, hey...
well, that would make sense, though.
Yeah, you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on better than me, anyway. And so, yeah, I have reason to believe that that's fairly accurate as far as speculation goes.
Yeah, but...
Which is awesome.
I think for the next few years on the 20th, it's going to be mostly Mage, Wraith, and Changeling. I don't know. Maybe they'll have time to do some more werewolf stuff, but they still have 2 big werewolf books in the pipeline, Changing Ways and Pendek's Guide to Subsidiaries, this new anthology, and then, in theory, at some point, the Bunyip Tribe book. So they aren't they're huge.
The Bunyip Tribe book? What?
The Bunyip
that
Tribe
makes
book.
sense. They did a White Howler Tribe book.
Okay, yeah, okay, I get that. But Bunyips, really?
Why?
I didn't know they were. I didn't know they were changing breed because they never came up in the breed.
They're
show.
a tribe. They're a tribe. They're werewolves.
Yeah, they're actual werewolves.
How come they have not come up before now?
Because they've been eradicated in the Big Wazi werewolf set.
Yep.
And they're not as famous.
They're like the weretrout.
Yeah, Croatoan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They were the Australian werewolves, if I recall correctly, and they were wiped out. So unlike the White Howlers, so unlike the White Howlers who became the Black Spiral Dancers, they weren't wiped out; they just became something else. The Bunyips were actually wiped out, so it would be. I mean, I suppose you could use it in a modern campaign and have like just 1 or 2 surviving Bunyip, or you find history about them, but it'd probably mostly be for historic
cave etchings and shit. Yeah, that'd be
but I mean, they also have Shattered Dreams, and so there's some content out there meant to set games during the War of Rage. So it would be a nice companion if you're totally into that setting.
Yeah, I just don't get werewolf. I really don't. I mean, it sounds like you guys who have played it are having, have big fun. And, Igor and Matt, man, I love talking to them about werewolf because I learn shit.
But Peter, you like magic items and wrecking shit. Yeah. Why do you not like werewolf?
I know, right?
That's what werewolf is all about. It's
right?
It's what werewolf ends up being all about in tabletop all too often. But
yeah,
I've actually LARPed werewolf more than I've tabletopped it, which is funny because I've only been to a few sessions. Werewolf is a great LARP. I
get a lot of that from Jessica. She seems to really love LARPing werewolf, and and then the guys in Brazil said that they had recently heard about a group that was starting up a werewolf LARP down there. So yeah, I can see it much more. I could see playing it as a LARP, not as tabletop. At least that's just me. And my taste in shit is my taste. I ain't trying to force that on nobody. But I've never really gotten into werewolf. Just don't. I mean, Kindred, as Jess said at the top of the show, the vampire is my first love.
I mean, vampire. Oh, go ahead.
I think it's a bit curious to say werewolf works better in LARP because I can imagine that I'm more convincing as a vampire than I like werewolf in Klinos. Like I'm 167 meters tall or small, and I mean, like I'm in Klinos.
Yeah, I love.
Just got to get a big fur hat, man. That's all you need.
Yeah, I just love all the werewolf social dynamics because with
what, huh?
I love sniff each other's butts? What's, just checking.
No, not exactly. I mean, in Vampire, everybody's out to backstab everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
And in Werewolf, everybody's out to be at the top of the pack, but the enemy is out there. Like, everybody is vying, to purify the pack. Everyone, your enemies aren't, I'm going to get you just because I'm a treacherous creature of the night. It's, you've proven yourself to be weak. You've proven yourself to harm the cause, and so I'm going to challenge you.
Or worm-tainted.
Or worm-tainted, but there are all these, complicated social dynamics around that, but ultimately everybody wants the same thing, and it just creates a really different type of animosity that I kind of find more compelling than the yes, we're allies. I know you're going to backstab me because you're an asshole because you're a vampire and we're all assholes, but whatever. We'll pretend for the night.
But speaking of LARP, did they have a game at GenCon?
They might have. I was so holed up with the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah.
I know there were LARPs.
But not all of them World of Darkness, I wouldn't think.
Oh, no. There were many, many, many LARPs. There were some World of Darkness ones. That all happens over in Lucas Oil Stadium, though. And I got to be honest, because I knew I was going to be kind of tethered to the rival demo tables, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to it.
Oh, dude. We wanted a good report, and you just failed.
Sorry.
Well,
that is so much fail.
Jennifer said she's going to Tampa. That would be...
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we'll have to have you back on the show after that. And I'd like to hear what, if any, opinions you have about con LARPing. Because con LARPing's a bit different than the weekly stuff that Jacob used to do.
Yeah, I've mostly ditched con LARPing. I visited only my local troop once. I planned to visit them again, but I didn't came to it yet. So most LARPing that I've done was actually at a convention.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So
you were at Grand Masquerade last year, weren't you, Jen?
Yes, I was.
You were so. Yeah. I am so jealous.
Actually, my very first lab was at the V20 European convention, which happened in Antwerp.
Yeah,
which was
I saw
way
the
back, I
ad for
think,
that.
2012. And the first big lab that actually got me to LARPing was when by Night Studios went and said like, okay, we've got this new MET vampire game and we've got this event in Las Vegas and you can really decide whether or not the Giovanni will stay in the Independent Alliance, what they will do, and it will be all canon. And I was like, oh damn it, I'm such a big Giovanni fan, and now I really
Did you go
have to
fangirl?
I didn't do LARP before. I mostly try to avoid it. Usually.
See, because you don't know this, but the rest of the guys do. I've never tabletopped.
Oh.
I started out LARPing. And my attempts to convert the local D&D players has failed miserably.
Man, die-hard D&D players just do not want to give up that D20.
No, they don't.
Precious to them. So, I have a question. You're going to Tampa. I don't suppose you have a ticket to the Changeling LARP in Tampa.
No, I don't. I thought about buying one, but I've got literally no idea about Changeling, except that they're Changelings.
Okay.
And I thought I would have more fun playing normal Giovanni.
Okay. Well, it was worth it.
A whole bunch of my local LARP group are organizing to go to the Canada Cane convention in the spring, and they actually have two things that are rolling out. One, they got the same company that did the Nordic LARP in Germany.
Whoop.
What was it called?
Participation Design Agency.
The
There's two big companies. The one who did End of the Line and Enlightenment in Blood, which is participation design, I think, by Johanna Collione. And then there's Sjoberg Studios or something like this with Klaus, who organizes stuff like the Convention of Thorns and who do as well stuff like the College of Wizardry.
Okay, so can't remember which one it was. So one of those companies made a Nordic LARP specifically for the Cane with the vampire masquerade setting that they are going to be doing at this. And they are also testing the Changeling LARP at Cane in the spring. And there's a whole bunch of people from my LARP group that is going to this. And I am trying my damnedest to figure out how I can get myself there with them as well, because even if I just go into one of those two, that would be enough for me.
I was hoping you'd get to go to Kane.
I would love to go in and actually try LARPing Changeling. I would love to try that out. I think that would be a blast.
Yeah, my intro to Changeling was LARP, and Changeling is a slightly more chaotic game than the other venues, to be honest.
What do you mean?
The Fae are unpredictable and and they don't give a shit.
You mean that they actually their field is bereft of fucks?
Their field is super bereft of fucks. I'll give an example. I'll give an example, and ask yourself, if you're playing a traditional vampire game, how many times you'd have to roll humanity in this situation. One of the games I ran at GenCon was Changeling, and it was 1925 Chicago gangsters. I had red caps in the North Side Gang, and there was a whole thing going on with them. So the motley of Changelings, they're tracking these two red cap North Side gangers, and they all just fail their stealth rolls. Nobody botched, thankfully, but everybody failed their stealth rolls. And so the red caps slide down an alley while they aren't looking. Thankfully, they kind of figure out what's going on. Okay. And the Ishu, who wasn't with the group of the rest of the motley, he was across the street watching all this. He looks at me and he says, "So, are there any cops around? Can I make a roll to see if I recognize any cops? And I'm thinking, what are you going to try and do here? I'm like, okay, sure, make a roll. And I rolled like a 1 die to see how many cops were around, to see how difficult it would be. I did not roll well, but he rolled well. And I'm like, okay, you see a guy you recognize from the neighborhood beat, but he's off duty. He's just here for the celebration. There's a big celebration in Uptown. I won't go into it. But he's off duty, but yeah, he's a cop. Sure, what are you going to do? And he walked up to him and he said, all right, I'm going to try and convince him that 2 guys just ran down that alley, dragging a woman, kicking and screaming and trying to get away. And I'm just like, you're going to send a mortal down that alley with 2 red caps. He's like, yeah. And I'm thinking, well, okay, I mean, that'll distract them long enough. I mean, they'll take like a whole 10 seconds killing that guy. You can walk past the alley in that time. And so I'm just like, man, if this were Vampire, you'd be doing a humanity check right now.
No,
but
shit.
But the Fae don't care.
Completely.
Like, the Fae, it doesn't matter. I'm a fairy. I don't fucking care. Go get eaten by red caps. Right. So he succeeds, and he convinces this guy that some woman is being, dragged off. Horrible things are going to happen. Nothing of the sort's happening. So our troll decides, okay, I'm going to meet up with this guy and help him in there. Well, okay, these red caps are expecting 3, 4 fully powered Fae to walk into this alley. They're not expecting a human, so they come out punching. And this red cap unleashes Dragon's Ire. Unleashing is like, I'm going to become a master marauder for 1 action, and I have this predetermined number of spheres. I'm going to invoke, like, all the chaotic magic of forever. Hey, storyteller, what do you think would happen?
Oh, jeez.
And Dragon's Ire is the combat art. And I'm like, okay. Cool. And I roll, and he randomly, and he attacks the police officer, and I'm like, and I roll this like ridiculous Dragon's Ire unleashing, and he's mortal, and I'm like, well, he is super dead. He's just real dead. And so they fight these red caps. They do fine against them, and at the end, it's like, well, okay, what are you gonna do about the dead cop? And there's a red cap. There's a red cap in our group, and the red cap in our group goes, well, if there's no body, there's no murder. And the red cap can eat anything. And so he just starts eating the guy. He just eats him whole. Just 'cause. And it's like, okay, are you going to hide? It's like, no, the mist will take care of it. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, well, like 2 or 3 people walk by and watch you eating this guy, and the mist take care of it, and they're not going to remember you. And that trauma will haunt them for months, and they won't understand why they're, having PTSD flashbacks. Okay. And it's like, what? I'm already unseelie. What are you going to do to me? The Fae don't give a fuck.
Completely out of fuck.
Like, in a pre-V5 vampire world, how many humanity checks did I just, drop?
Yeah. And I thought Kindred were pretty fuckless, too.
No, the Fae just don't care.
No, yeah. Other than the masquerade violations for the Camarilla, it's not really an issue.
No, the Fae had the mists.
What is this? I've heard it mentioned before.
So
is it the same thing that mages have that sort of keeps people from noticing them doing mage shit?
Totally
mages
different.
Mages don't really have anything like that.
Yeah, mages have nothing like that. Mages are not protected
at all. Like that.
So the mist...
Paradox, but that's different.
Yeah, but that doesn't keep people from...
No, it doesn't keep people from noticing.
There's
something we were talking about it on the last Mage show. I call it the SCP field. It's somebody else's problem.
Arcane. Arcane doesn't keep people from seeing. It keeps people from remembering you. They won't forget the magic. It's not like it wipes everything away, and only certain mages have it. You have to purchase it. They'll just forget your face. They'll remember that they saw that atrocity down that alleyway.
Yeah.
They won't be able to put their finger on exactly who it was who did it, and maybe they'll remember somebody else did it, but they'll remember the atrocity. So the mists are like that times 1,000, and they apply to all changelings, not just some. The Fae are wrong. They don't belong in reality.
No, they don't. They're our reality now is technology based, and belief is part of their power. Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, it's not technology. So there are technological Fae. Knockers are a thing. It's about belief. It's about belief in them to an extent, and it's more complicated than that. But when the wave of disbelief got bad enough, as a way to protect them, they curled up inside of humans. And the mists, which already existed and could be sort of intentionally used to hide a fae, they became more powerful. No one knows why, because no one knows why anything happens with the fae. There is a reason. No one will ever figure it out. They just won't. Also because of the mists. Mm-hmm. The mists come in and just erase everything having to do with the fae. It's, if you've played Exalted...
Does it get rid of the bodies too?
No.
No?
No, it doesn't get rid of the bodies. It's just people will remember something else. Like if they saw a horrible... Like if they see a dragon come down and just like char someone, mm-hmm. they will concoct a story in their mind. It can be... It's like delirium times 1,000. And supernaturals are not immune at all. The Fae aren't even immune. The Fae are not immune.
Other Fae would not notice?
Depends on their banality. Depends on whether or not they're in or out of a banality coma. They'll eventually slip into being undone, and their Fae soul will be trapped inside their rotting banality like body until it dies, and they're finally released to reincarnate. And during that whole stretch, they remember nothing of the previous part of their life. They reconstruct their entire history. I described it on Facebook the other day as reality is in a perpetual state of gaslighting the Fae about the fact that they exist.
Yeah. That was a very, very good way to put it.
I mean...
Concise.
Yeah. But as a result... But the thing is, like, if you see some horrible, traumatic, monstrous fairy thing, you still have the trauma. You just don't have the memory that lets you make sense of the trauma.
Yeah, because storm giants and whatnot definitely, without the mists, they would be noticed.
Yes, they would. So yeah, it's really ugly, and my players were just happy to abuse it. They were just totally happy to abuse it.
Jeez, see, that's a problem.
Now imagine a game with 25 players.
Yeah, and then shit went sideways 10 minutes before you started playing.
Yeah, that's a changeling LARP.
Okay, all right.
Really interesting.
That's interesting. I might enjoy watching a changeling LARP. I don't know that I'd want to play.
They're fun. You
yeah,
really
it sounds like chaos. It. But I'm
really curious how it will mesh with vampire. Like in Temper, they do mix it with vampires.
I couldn't quite make that out.
Yeah.
Kind of flickered for a second.
In Temper, the announcement is that they do the changeling LARP, but like with vampires in the Vampire Blood and Betrayal LARP inside.
Oh, wow.
So
that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. It's like Madame... oh god, I don't get her name. The Toreador Justica is sentenced to death, and she made some strange pact with with a changeling, and now it probably will get strange.
Oh dear gods.
Oh.
Wow. A dying Toreador Justicar is enchanted and makes a pact, I can only assume, with some incredibly powerful she-lord.
Yeah.
That can only go downhill.
Yeah, there is no upside to that.
No.
Sounds like a very interesting evening for sure.
Yeah.
It does. I would play that game.
Okay, I need some clarification on this hunger thing. So you're not using blood pool anymore, yes? That's what you were saying for VCon?
That is correct. Yeah.
So they've completely removed the blood pool from the equation.
Yes.
Okay. So how do you keep track of how much blood you have? You mentioned hunger, but how much you have that you can burn?
So
it doesn't matter how much you have. It matters how hungry you are.
Yeah. It matters how hungry you are. So the idea is, when you're a human and you eat, you don't think, how much food is there in my stomach right now?
Yeah.
You just know you're hungry, and it's more complicated than that. And so every time you use a power in the alpha systems, these numbers might change, so keep in mind alpha. But whenever you use a power, you roll a die. And if you get a 1, a 2, or a 3 on that die, you gain a hunger. If you get a 4 or above, you don't gain a hunger. You're fine. So hunger is a bit of a gambling act. You could use 10 disciplines in a row and gain no hunger if the dice are kind.
Yeah.
Or you could roll 3 times in a row and gain 3 hunger. I mean, it's really capricious.
And then, is it, a 5-dot system, just like most of the rest of the stuff? Once you get to 5 dots, you frenzy?
Once you get to 5 dots, you can no longer use hunger. You can no longer use anything that requires hunger, and you have a frenzy check.
So you got to either feed or find yourself in a bad situation.
Basically, and the stronger your hunger is, the more likely that other shit will go wrong. So whenever you take an action of any kind, I think in the rules currently it's whenever you roll the dice. When I had my players do things like knowledge checks about what information am I going to give to which players, I didn't include hunger because you're not exerting yourself at all. That's just a passive do you know a thing. But normally whenever you roll anything that is an actual action, you replace a number of dice in your dice pool with hunger dice. So if you have 3 hunger and your dice pool is 6, 3 of those dice are hunger dice. And if you get 2 1s, I think it's if you get 2 1s and one of them is on a hunger die, then you gain a compulsion. And the compulsions get progressively worse. And it's basically the hunger driving you to act in irrational ways. Some of them are clan specific, a lot of them are not. Players now get to choose their compulsions. Before, in the pre-alpha, you rolled on the compulsion table, and there's a lot of feedback from players that were just like, this is Vampire, we don't want to roll on tables. So you don't roll on the compulsion table anymore. I mean, let's be honest, we don't want to roll on tables. So now the player just gets to pick their compulsion, but they have to pick it from this preset list. If you already have a compulsion and you get that again, you have to take a higher level compulsion. They stack. You don't lose your old one when you get a new one. And they're pretty debilitating once you get to higher levels, and you have to act them out.
How long did the compulsions last?
I'd have to go back and look. I want to say it's till you feed.
Okay.
Until you...
No, that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's until you clear the hunger. The other thing that the hunger dice do is they can now give you messy critical successes. So now if you roll 2 10s on a die roll, it counts as a critical success. That was not in the pre-alpha. Whether or not that stays at 2 10s, there was some discussion about that and some feedback from playtesting. So that might get tweaked in the future. It might not. I don't know. But if either of those 10s is on a hunger die, you have a messy critical success. You succeed. You succeed magnificently. But you succeed because your beast pushed you to reckless abandons of excellence, and it's messy and things go wrong. You meant to shove the guy up against a wall and hurt him a little and scare him, and you snap his neck. Something bad happens when you get a messy critical. But technically you succeed with flair. So that's the other thing. The more hunger dice you have, the more likely that is to happen.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just I'm still trying to wrap my head around a no blood pool. But
I actually like. I
like it. It seems to be a bit more. I don't want to say realistic because that's kind of you don't.
It's
want to use that
less.
word.
It's less
cumbersome.
It's more abstract. So how did you find the adjustment back to 9 stats?
I loved it. I hated the 3 stats. I got to be honest. I did not like the 3 stats at all.
I was one of the few people that liked the idea of going down to 3 stats. But I mean 9 stats is what everyone's used to for 30 years. So.
Oh, jeez! You're talking about strength, intelligence.
I would hope that maybe they could make a compromise, maybe 6 stats, because I really like the 3 stats too, and this 9 stats I often have that player. 1 stat of each category is either ridiculously overpowered or totally almost useless.
As we've said more than one occasion.
I find myself with the 9 stats, oftentimes you end up with 3 stats in the same category that are almost the same number anyway. Or you end up with people doing stuff like, well, I got fortitude, so I'm going to slough my stamina so I can boost my strength because I don't have potence.
But But
Yeah.
you can't do that the same way anymore because the physical disciplines don't just straight up enhance your stats anymore. You buy levels of fortitude, and each one has its own power. You buy levels of celerity, and each one has its own power. So, and the other thing is, now, like, your health pool is 5 plus your stamina. And so, I'm totally going to min-max and just max my stamina. Well, it's like, okay, so you're a tank, but you need dexterity and strength to do any good. And, dexterity... They've set it up so it's much harder to min-max. Your initiative now is based on the attack skill you're going to go into combat and use. So it's not like, well, I'm going to max my dex and focus on firearms and melee and get lots of celerity, because then absolutely everything I ever use is just going to use this one, attribute. Now, if you can't really do that, because firearms doesn't use dex anymore. Firearms uses perception.
Does it?
Makes sense. Totally makes sense.
It does. You're right.
And so they work
Sword
really
would
hard.
use dex.
Yeah. Oh, and melee absolutely uses dex. So now each of the 3 major types of combat use different attributes. If you go hand to hand with someone, you're rolling strength plus brawl. If you go blade with someone, you're rolling dex plus melee. If you pull out a firearm, it's perception plus melee. Perception's a mental stat.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, if you're a sniper, you don't even really need particularly high... You could have physical as tertiary and still be a ridiculous sniper.
Well, and that makes sense because snipers, they use math more than agility when they're trying to set up a shot.
Well, and stealth.
Well, yeah. I mean,
when you're 2 miles away, stealth doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, you still want to stay hidden because, depending on the situation. And that's still
the cops
a
are
situation
going to be a little bent out of shape if they find you,
yeah, I mean...
camped out on a rooftop with a long gun.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I wouldn't mind it if they streamlined the stats a little bit. I'm not a big fan of appearance. I've never been a fan of appearance.
Really? Why not?
Because you never roll it. Like...
Yeah.
Appearance is in the eye of the beholder. Like, there are a couple disciplines that use it, but if you get outside of Vampire Land, where individual abilities call for specific attributes and there are more standardized power dice, appearance just it's a dump stat. Like, I have it because I'm
useless.
Yeah, I have it because I'm a she, and in character I'm supposed to be gorgeous, so I took some of it. But I never use it.
You still have charisma.
Yeah.
Because you might be ugly as, I don't know, a dog, but you have the charisma to compensate for it and Ali.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't make sense that I started the game at 1 appearance, I spent a bunch of XP, and now I have 5 appearance.
Yeah.
Like, you can learn to be manipulative. You can learn to be charismatic. You can develop your brain. You can develop your reaction time. You can develop strength and stamina and dexterity. All of those things can be improved over your life. Appearance is a thing that, like, I can learn to wear makeup and have a better fashion sense, but that doesn't actually, like, change my body in any meaningful way. That's a skill. And I've never liked appearance as an attribute. Like, it's so weird.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Victor.
Especially if you're not playing a Toreador.
Even if you're playing a Toreador.
I very rarely play Nosferatu, but I really like taking the monstrous flaw because it just eliminates the appearance stat anyway, and then you just don't have to worry about it.
I like eerie presence myself. Is if you're you can as an Archon, that's the kind of that, and unearthly chill is the other one. Is you can turn those flaws into useful. Kindred it would be less likely to attack you if you give off this.
Be realistic. Player characters don't give a shit.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So they just completely out of fucks about that.
You can look as creepy as you want. You can look as intimidating as you want. They give zero fucks.
All right, guys, we're at our time. I want to thank our guest tonight, Jennifer. appreciate having you here. We will have you back, absolutely. We'd like to, pick your brain when you come back from these cons that you're planning to go to, like we did to Victor tonight.
Sure.
And of
I'd
course,
be glad to get one.
And of course, as always, love having you here, Victor.
Thank you.
You really, really make my day when I do get a chance to sit and chat about the shit we love. Because as I tell folks whenever they ask, when I say I do a podcast, they're like, "Oh, what's it about?" I said, "A very, very niche market." Now, granted, a lot of them have heard of Vampire the Masquerade. It's now, of course, not as popular as D&D, but people have heard of it.
When
Yeah, a lot of people have.
When my kids hear me talk about having a podcast on YouTube, their eyes perk up and they're all like, "Oh, you guys must make money if you got
Nope.
YouTube videos." I'm like,
I'm never going to monetize this. It's
No.
not worth the
No.
effort.
I'm like, that is so not the case. I'm like, it'd be great if this was a paid job, but it's not.
No, but it's not. I mean, that's cool, though. I mean, I'd rather have more fun, and that's what I do with these. I really, really enjoy having, you guys on, getting a chance to sit you down and in a fairly low-stress environment, and just let these conversations organically evolve. And they really do. Some of them are great. Some of them not so great. It happens. But I want to thank my co-host, Jacob. Thank you, man, for lining up our guests for tonight. And I got a question. I'm going to start doing this at the end of every show. What do you want to see here? What do you want to talk about next show? Now, I'm not talking about just the folks in channel. I'm talking about the folks in the chat and anybody who may be listening to this within the 2-week period. And if you'd like to see us do something specific, let us know. Victor, Jen, got any ideas? Let's see. That one was tough. All the rest of this you can get through, right?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Most of the stuff that I want to talk about right now is Changeling, and I'm talking about it on my podcast. And
yeah, but that's,
yeah,
I don't know if we've got a Changeling show queued up.
You've done a couple already, so I don't know if you're back around to that
New
yet.
Wave. Yes, we're going to do Scion at some point. As soon as we can find somebody who wants to talk about it, we could not find guests to save our lives.
Who knows about it?
Yeah,
Not
and
just
then
those
somebody's
who wanna talk
actually
about
played it. So, yes, we're going to try and do a Scion show as soon as we find somebody who wants to talk about it. Basically.
I mean, the Kickstarter did awfully well. There's got to be somebody.
Yeah, there's got to be, but apparently we don't know them.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I mean,
the Scion Facebook pages don't have a lot of traffic, so there doesn't seem to be a lot of conversation going on about it. So,
see, well,
anyway,
yeah. Anywho,
we'll get there.
I was just curious to see if you guys had any suggestions.
Not really. The thing that currently interests me most is CP5, and I really hope they publish the playtest soon. I would like, if it would be before Friday, I would be so happy.
Awesome. And yes, New Wave, we still have your list. We're using them sparingly because there aren't that, we don't want to saturate ourselves. We've mistakenly done that a couple of times. We've been very, very, very vampire centric. And that's cool and all, but we can't just do this on just vampire. It's not going to be nearly as entertaining. So again, want to thank our guests tonight and my wonderful co-host, And everybody say good night.
Good
Peace out.
night.
Good night.